Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this CaBA webinar on exploring how local nature recovery strategies can help chalk streams. For those who don't know me, my name's Emily McCauley and I'm the Communications Assistant for Media and Events at the Rivers Trust. I'll shortly be handing over to Alison Matthews, Chalk Stream Restoration Programme Manager here at the Rivers Trust. But before I do that, I'll just quickly go through a few things first. So to enable captions, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and you can change the size of these settings as well. You can submit questions through the Q&A function, which is also found at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A will be at the end of this session. Please share your comments in the chat. And finally, please note that the webinar is being recorded, but as an audience member, you won't be on screen, and the recording will be available on the CaBA website afterwards. That's all from me, so I'll hand you over to Alison to begin today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. I seem to be, oh no, I am here. I was having a problem with my video for a minute. So thanks everybody for joining us this morning for this webinar. It is the third in our series of Chalk Stream webinars, and we're really pleased this time to be doing a double act with the Big Chalk team. We have obviously a shared interest in chalk, so and local nature recovery strategies, so it seemed to make sense to us to run this one together. So you may be wondering why you're here. It's quite early in the morning. So why are we here to talk about local nature recovery strategies and chalk streams? Well, for those who haven't already heard the statistic, England has 85% of the world's chalk streams. So we are very important as custodians of these really precious habitats. Chalk streams, like many of our rivers, are under pressure. They need to be protected and restored. And we think that local nature recovery strategies could be a fabulous vehicle for helping us to achieve that. And government has recently also made announcements that they want to see local nature recovery strategies used even more. So we think there's a great opportunity there for us to get involved. So we're keen to hear from you. We're going to present today. Sorry, I'm struggling with my technology. We're going to have a series of presentations today from the Environment Agency, Big Chalk and Rivers Trust team, and also from Zoe, West of England Nature Partnerships, to tell you a little bit about what's been happening. But we're really keen to make sure that we leave enough space for the Q&A session, because we really want to hear from you as to what's working well, what maybe we could work a bit harder on, to help the responsible authorities who are still producing their local nature recovery strategies to make sure that chalk streams are really in there front and centre and getting the attention they deserve. So I'm going to hand over in a sec to Hannah Hyland from the agency to give us an introduction. Then Bruce is going to talk to us about the work he's involved in with Big Chalk. And then it's going to be very interesting to hear from Zoe, because she's involved in the group that produced the very first published local nature recovery strategies. So she's going to give us an insight into what's been going on there. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing in the local nature recovery strategies for chalk streams, before ending with David's going to chair a session for us, a Q&A session. But it's not just questions. We're really happy just to hear from you about your experiences, your thoughts. So the presentations will probably take just short of an hour to go through. We've got an hour and a half session today, and so that the QA session at the end is as long as we want to make it. We may finish early, we may not. So at this point, if I stop sharing my screen, then I'll hand over to Hannah to give us an introduction. Thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. I'll just put my slides up. Hopefully you can all see those. So yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Hannah Hyland. I lead our work on local nature recovery strategies within the Environment Agency. But I'm here today kind of to represent kind of the whole DEFRA family. So we work very closely directly with DEFRA, Natural England and Forestry Commission at a national level on kind of implementing the policies for LNRS and supporting preparation around the country. So just to start with, for those that aren't as familiar with local nature recovery strategies, just a quick recap of what they are. So they are a new system of spatial strategies for nature and environmental improvement. They were introduced in the Environment Act in 2021, but they also have their own regulations and statutory guidance, kind of which set out kind of what they are and how they are to be prepared, etc. There are 48 LNRSs currently being prepared or published across England. There will be no overlaps. It will be a complete picture to cover the whole of England when complete. Strategy preparation is locally led, and that's by a responsible authority. The responsible authorities cover generally the upper tier local authorities or combined authorities, unitary authorities. So they have that responsibility. Alongside that, they have supporting authorities, so Natural England and other local authorities to support them. And the idea, though, is that they are kind of given that responsible role, but to draw in other partners and to develop strategies collaboratively. What makes up a local nature recovery strategy? So within the strategies, they will set out that kind of existing areas of importance for biodiversity. Through that process, they will agree priorities for nature recovery. And then importantly, they will map locations where the creating or improving habitat is most likely to give the greatest benefit for nature and wider environment. So they are local in name, but they have been designed to kind of be bigger than that. They have been designed to support delivery of national environmental objectives and kind of the Environment Act targets, so the biodiversity targets, but also kind of reference to water targets and the woodland cover targets, and then elements within the environmental improvement plan. The one I've drawn out here is the one around the water environment, and this is a steer that was given to responsible authorities when preparing the LNRS. So just to kind of read this one out, all LNRSs should seek to make a positive contribution to the water environment through the creation or improvement of habitat for biodiversity. This includes seeking to limit or mitigate nutrient and sediment pollution from agriculture, and more generally seeking to improve water quality and availability and contribute to restoring 75% of our water bodies to good ecological status. So that's a clear steer as to how LNRSs should be helping us in that kind of water environment. As I mentioned, the responsible authority areas, this is a map of the geography of LNRSs. So these are the 48 that you can see here. We've overlain the Chalk Rivers map. The areas identified in grey, there are 4 of those. Those are the 4 LNRSs that have been published. So that's West of England, we'll hear from later, Cornwall, Isle of Wight and Northamptonshire. And then the others we expect to see kind of coming out over the course of this year. So what should be included in an LNRS in relation to chalk streams? So as I mentioned, the regulations and statutory guidance that go alongside LNRSs, they set out kind of the different steps for preparing an LNRS. And LNRSs will identify any chalk streams that are designated. So whether that's an SAC, SSSI, local nature reserve, local wildlife site, they are part of that first step in the LNRS process to identify existing areas that are of particular importance for biodiversity. One of the next steps is about a written description of the strategy area, and that's a requirement to do that. We have provided in the data to local nature recovery strategy responsible authorities national chalk stream distribution data, and colleagues around the country will be supporting responsible authorities to identify. So it is likely where chalk streams exist that will be reflected within that description of the LNRS area. And then this bit that's the important bit for LNRSs, they will include map locations for measures to create or improve habitat for nature and wider environmental goals. And these are the things that may be chalk streams. But I guess it's important to note here that not necessarily that the LNRS will not necessarily map all chalk streams in any of the kind of required steps. So just to touch on how we're involved, and alongside Natural England and the Forestry Commission, we've been working jointly with them. Natural England have that supporting authority role, so they've kind of got a very hands-on role with the responsible authorities, but EA and FC have been working closely with them. And part of that has been to promote consistency and high standards across LNRSs. to encourage that effective collaborative working and kind of link to partners and people that we already work with and we have those relationships with. But also to flag risks and issues and where we're seeing things maybe not being taken forward where we would want them to be. And that very much relates back for the Environment Agency to those national environmental objectives I mentioned. The Environment Agency has taken a lead role on the water environment, and so we have staff around the country feeding in to each of the LNRSs to kind of help ensure that water environment is reflected. At preparation, that's been about kind of our data and our technical knowledge, helping to incorporate kind of existing relevant work that's happening on the ground and feeding in links to other plans, strategies. So that's whether that's kind of river basin management plan objectives, chalk stream restoration plans, ensuring kind of that join up. LNRSs are not kind of wanting to kind of reinvent the wheel. You know, where things are happening, we want to join up to that and kind of make that more efficient and effective delivery. So yes, leading to delivery. Once LNRSs are in place and the Environment Agency are looking to that delivery role and delivering actions to create or enhance habitat isn't new for us. It's not new for the Environment Agency, and we're already involved in chalk stream restoration around the country. But what we're wanting to do is look to use the LNRSs to kind of be that tool to help better targeting and support our own ambitions for creating a better place for people and wildlife. The picture on this slide is of the Scarborough Beck in East Yorkshire. And just to kind of give an example of the sort of thing that we're looking for in LNRSs, this is a collaborative project between the Environment Agency, East Yorkshire Rivers Trust and the landowners, the South Dalton Estate. Scarborough Beck is one of the chalk streams that flows off the Yorkshire Wolds, and whilst many are designated as SSSIs, this particular beck is not. And it's this type of activity that should be the focus of LNRS. LNRS is not about repeating things that are already in place or being progressed for designated sites. It's about joining those up, and that sort of bigger, better, more joined up, the Lawton principles, bringing those opportunities forward through the LNRS process. So I've kind of touched on what they are and how they're being prepared, and how we're thinking a little bit about using them, but what is the ambition, government's ambition for how LNRSs will be used? So they are tools to drive action for nature recovery and wider environmental outcomes more efficiently. And the expectation is that they will be a shared effort. They are not linked to one individual kind of lever or kind of funding route. They will be a shared effort across public, private and voluntary sector partners. Some of the links are a bit more, there's a bit more clarity around them, and some are set out in legislation. So Biodiversity Net Gain, there is a clear link between the Biodiversity Net Gain metric and the local nature recovery strategies. So for those not familiar with it, if you're doing kind of biodiversity net gain, if you're creating something which is a measure identified in an LNRS, there is an incentive through the metric, through what's called the strategic significance multiplier. There is also a duty on all public bodies under the biodiversity duty to have regard to LNRSs in terms of their activities, and that's very much the lens that the Environment Agency kind of has started looking through, but all public bodies will have that duty to do that. In terms of the link across to environmental land management, the expectation is that LNRSs will be a tool to support farmers and landowners to help them identify what they can do. Measures are, we're looking to kind of align measures with those through the Countryside Stewardship higher tier, and it's expected that LNRSs will be used for future rounds of landscape recovery projects. In terms of planning, alongside kind of the B&G commitments, the planning, the current kind of have regard requirement is there for planning authorities, but that's being strengthened later this year when a clause in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act is turned on, and that will require plan makers to take account of LNRSs. There's a kind of legal kind of strengthening to have regard, moving to a take account requirement under the planning system. And then finally, it's about funding and public and private funding. We are already seeing some government funds, including LNRS, within their kind of requirements when people are preparing applications for government funding. So the Species Survivor Fund, the Water Restoration Fund already have elements within that, and we expect more to follow. But there's also this commitment around green finance and securing private investment into that. There are some pilots running around the country called Local Investment in Natural Capital, and there's that's looking at how the join up between LNRS and those pilots in giving some of that intelligence and driving how what the measures identified in LNRS can give confidence to investors as to what they can put their money into. And then importantly, how they won't be used. So LNRSs are not designed to be prescriptive. That's kind of a key point. They are there to help drive kind of efficient and effective delivery, but they do not require owners or managers of lands to make specific changes and the land use changes that have been identified. They don't place new restrictions on developing land. And they don't identify areas to be given legal nature protections that create restrictions on how land can be used or managed. Importantly, there will be no kind of prevention of other nature conservation work in areas that haven't been prioritised. So if people feel like there's new information or another project is taken forward, that is fine. It doesn't matter that it's not been identified within the LNRS. And then finally, the LNRS itself won't determine regulatory decisions. So talking about delivery, a lot of the effort at the moment is in preparing the strategies, but we are turning our attention, and government is turning their attention to how we turn that into action on the ground and what that looks like. The responsible authorities were tasked with preparation, and they are now being asked to continue that into the delivery space. This builds on something which was in the English devolution white paper that was published back in December last year. But it will be around the responsible authorities' kind of role in developing partnerships and convening partners and stakeholders to take that action. We, the Environment Agency, alongside Natural England and Forestry Commission, will be part of that sort of delivery partnership, as will other stakeholders, many who may be on the call today, encouraging partners to use LNRSs to inform their activities. Core activities for responsible authorities are likely to be those listed here. So that convening role I mentioned, coordinating that delivery of LNRSs, creating a project pipeline of what can come next, and attracting that private investment. There will be a role in monitoring and reporting as they kind of move into second iterations of LNRSs. And then the promotion of the use of LNRS, as you've seen in how LNRSs will be used. The idea is it cuts across a number of different sectors. So there's an important role there to ensure that that LNRS is promoted and the use of it is encouraged by a wide range of audiences. And if we get that right, and if we're successful, the intention is that that achieves better outcomes for nature and wider environment through the actions that are taken. Just to give you a bit of a flavour of what's in the LNRSs, you're going to see more in the other presentations this morning, but this is one of the 4 published LNRSs. This is the Isle of Wight Local Nature Recovery Strategy, which was published last year. And what we've seen in this is a really clear direction. So you have a clear priority that maps down to a proposed measure, and then onto the map you can see where that activity is taken. So just drawing out the chalk stream priority here. So the priority is about protecting and enhancing the health of chalk streams. And the measure is prioritising all chalk influenced stream habitats and their catchments for integrated water quality, river restoration and habitat mosaic. And then it focuses on particular catchments on the Isle of Wight, which is then played down into the map here that you can see. The mapping is intuitive. If you click on the locations on the map, they bring up this little box which gives you that information about what it is they are wanting you to do in that location, anybody working in that area. So I've mentioned kind of the LNRSs, the 48. This is just a snapshot of where we are around the country. We've got the 4 published. We have 11 that are waiting to publish. So they've been through that public consultation stage. And then we have a number currently in consultation. But behind the scenes, there are still a number coming through. So there's approximately half that are yet to reach consultation stage. So they are still opportunities for you to input and influence if they are in areas that you are working. So how to get involved? They have been designed to be collaborative, and around the country, responsible authorities are actively engaging with communities and local partner organisations. If you aren't yet involved, particularly in those areas I showed that are still in that preparation stage, then it's not too late. There are still opportunities to do that. There are some links here that we'll be sharing after the webinar that can enable you to kind of find out more and find out where to go to access them. Where LNRSs are more progressed, though, it's about understanding what's in those LNRSs and looking at how you can use them in your work and help deliver what we're all wanting to achieve and drive that nature recovery. So that's it from me. I will leave it there. Stop sharing, and I think we're handing over to Bruce.
Yeah, my turn to share. Thank you, Hannah. Okay, so thank you, Hannah, for an excellent and comprehensive 101 on local nature recovery strategies. Now, what I want to do is introduce you to Big Chalk and tell you a bit about how we are doing our best to influence local nature recovery strategies to reflect the priorities and measures we need for Big Chalk's priorities. For us, it goes more than chalk streams. Our major priorities are grasslands, chalk streams, and woodlands. But we'll focus on the chalk stream bits we've done here. So Big Chalk. Big Chalk is the contiguous high carbon content soils area in the south of England. If you remember Hannah's map, there were chalk streams further north in the Lincolnshire Wolds and the Yorkshire Wolds. So the Big Chalk does go north beyond, so that the calcareous land does go beyond that, but we've kept it to the south of England as a starting point because it's big enough in any case. It's 26,000 square kilometres, and that's 20% of England, so it's huge. So it's one of the original ideas is to turn this into try and get nature recovery across this, get it into one joined up nature recovery network, which will mean that species and nature will be able to respond to climate change as we warm up and give them space to move northwards as needed. We are not a project ourselves, we're a programme. We've got over 160 partners as part of it, and we see ourselves as the missing middle between the high-level government targets such as 30 by 30, the Environmental Improvement Plan, and the brilliant work that's going on the ground by all our partners. And we're aiming to try and sort of strategically link those up together and sort of basically amplify the work our partners are doing and get it in a functioning sort of nature recovery network. So Hannah showed you the Isle of Wight. I've thought, well, I'm still on maps. I'll just sort of show you. This is Hampshire, and this is being under consultation at the moment. And just to give you a feel for a few more details of this, since I'm sort of following on with maps. So on the top left here, these are the areas of particular importance for biodiversity. So these are the core areas. These are the triple SIs, SACs and national nature reserves and things like that. And then on the bottom right are the opportunity areas that Hannah was talking about. So these are complementary to each other. They should be exclusive to each other. The LNRS is not about as Hannah said, it's not about working the triple SIs, getting them up to condition. That's for something else. That's for a thing called the protected site strategies, which are being piloted and rolled out. And the protected site strategies and local nature recovery strategies should complement each other really well. But what you can see is there are some of the chalk stream areas. I'm going to go to the next one. And when you delve in on, sort of dive in and highlight on the map, on that map, you highlight the riparian measures, you can see that there's quite a lot across the chalk streams. On the bottom right is a big chalk map corresponding area, and you can see, for instance, in the bottom left, there's not so much, not so many opportunities there. That's because there's a lot of that's already protected, but you can still see that a lot of the opportunities do map along the chalk streams, which is great. There's three primary measures the Hampshire have put in here, and as you zoom in, you can start to see them showing better. So zoom in a bit, and you see the riparian buffers. So that's the blue lines, and you see the groundwater source protection zones. However, you zoom in further to find the fish migration barriers, you'll see that the riparian buffers disappear. This is deliberate, and different LNRSs are doing this in different ways. They're not mapping precisely to parcels of land. There's a bit of fuzziness there. So for instance, Oxfordshire and Berkshire are putting hexagons around. And if you looked at the LNRS carefully, at the LNRS one, it was just a blob of area. So it's not you can't go, as I say, they're not mapping directly to the parcels of land, and that's very deliberate. And as Hannah showed, for most of them, if you click on the bit that you're interested in, the measures will pop up and what you can do. So who is these for? Who's the most important? Well, it's all of us really, but bearing in mind that 70% of Big Chalk is farmland, the farmers and land managers are a really, really important audience. They've been involved in putting the LNRSs together, and a lot of the measures are particular for them. And indeed, many LNRSs, many of the ones I've seen, will have separate sections for advice for farmers, either as part of the main LNRS or sometimes as a separate thing. So they are really important for delivering it. And when you map the farm clusters across Big Chalk, what's heartening is that a lot of the farm clusters are around chalk streams and the catchment areas. So that's obviously groups to start working with and aiming, because we know they're doing fantastic work. And so hopefully the LNRSs will be really helpful to them. Talking about LNRSs, how many have we got? We've actually got, Big Chalk covers 27 LNRSs. And I should, and so just be slightly different to the map that Hannah showed, and slightly different to the one that Alison's going to show in a moment, because Big Chalk is more than just chalk streams. It covers more than the chalk stream areas, as my previous map showed, but it's not all the chalk streams. But within our area, we've got three of the four that are published and 6 that are preparing for publication. So we can't influence those ones anymore. But we've got 4 in consultation, although bear in mind, if you want to input to Suffolk and Norfolk, today is your last day to do that. And then we've got 4 prepping for consultation and 10 in an early stage. So there's 16 out of 27 that it will be possible to influence. And the way we've been doing that, we started before they came to consultation, but we started by, in most of the areas, LNRS areas, we got Big Chalk champions to sort of champion the priorities that we need for Big Chalk, and to try and get them to make sure there's join up across the different LNRS areas. We put some guidance together, and they went out and did some great work, and then we can start to see some of that as the consultations are coming through. Now, once the consultations started coming through, I started putting together a tool to keep a track of them and keep a track of the priorities and measures. I haven't focused on all the different themed areas. I've only focused on the ones which we deemed most important for Big Chalk, so that's grasslands, streams and woodlands. And here's an example from Norfolk. These are for all of them as they come through, I'm pulling them out. So the theme for rivers and streams. The light blue is general ones for streams, and the dark blue is ones that are specific for chalk streams. So there's some good stuff there generally for streams and rivers. And then at the bottom, they've got specifically for chalk streams, it's restore and enhance chalk stream habitats are the priorities. As the priority, and the two measures are restoration of river meanders and reconnection of the streams with the floodplain. Though I suspect a lot of the others will be good for them as well. So you can also see on this one, in this case, all these measures are mapped. Not all of them are always mapped, some are a bit more general, and that varies across the different ones. So this is a tool I put up that's available. I'm updating it, and we've also updated our guidance. So you can find that on the Big Chalk website, the latest guidance note for local nature recovery strategies. And as part of that, with the help of Plant Life and Alison for the chalk streams, we've put together some recommended best practice priorities and measures for both grasslands and rivers. And here is some of the examples that Alison's put together for the chalk streams. You see the top bit is rivers in general, and then some very specific chalk stream ones there. So that's who we are, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to influence the local nature recovery strategies, and as Hannah said, we've still got an opportunity to influence quite a lot of them. So for Big Chalk, it's 16 out of 27. We can still do that, and they do take it, and it's a really important stage. So for instance, I know that Oxfordshire, after they closed their consultation, they had thousands of responses to deal with. So they're not going to come out until November, I don't think it is, but but they're listening and they're taking them on board. So I think it's an opportunity for everyone to go out and have their say. Thank you. That's me. And I'm passing on to Zoe, I think.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm just going to share my screen as well. Also, apologies, there is some building work going on next door, but I hope the microphone is good enough that you can't hear it. But if it becomes a problem, please somebody let me know and I'll go somewhere else. Okay, so I am just going to talk briefly about what life has been like since publishing our LNRS. So I'm from the West of England Nature Partnership. We published our local nature recovery strategy last November. The responsible authority is the West of England Combined Authority, and then the 4 unitary authorities for Bristol, Bath, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset are the supporting authorities. So just to flag that I'm kind of standing in for my colleague Stuart, who's our LNRS program manager, but he's on parental leave. So as the kind of partnership manager who convened a lot of the input to the LNRS, I'm sort of speaking on all of our partners' behalf. So you've seen a few of these maps already now, but this is the local habitat map for the West of England. You can see the areas already of importance and then that could become of importance, which we've called focus areas. We accompanied the strategy with a toolkit, so a kind of interactive online application that can be used by farmers, landowners, communities, anyone in the region really who wants to get involved with local nature recovery. And we also launched 9 kind of strategic programs alongside it to kind of kickstart that delivery. So here's just a little snapshot of the toolkit, which sets out all of the different recommended measures in those focus areas. We don't actually have any chalk streams in the west of England, but we do have lots of calcareous soils and habitats. So the kind of pinky purple and the orange are mosaic and grassland measures where there's a lot of calcareous recommendations. And since we published this toolkit, my colleague Stuart, who I mentioned, has been doing a lot of training with planning colleagues, farm advisors, cluster facilitators, and also our partners who work with community groups to basically train them in how to use the toolkit and how to then kind of deliver onward training to the people that they work with. And we've also kind of been iteratively, I say we, the combined authority who host the application have been iteratively improving the app in response to feedback as well. So they've added some new features around highlighting particular benefits to species that arise from implementing the recommended measures. They've regularly update the grant web resources, so any measure will link you to recommended funding opportunities for that measure. And obviously there have been quite a lot of changes to particularly SFI and countryside stewardship. So that's been updated as well. And we've had kind of specific reviews by accessibility teams for user journey and experience. So the company who kind of provide the software are going to look into some of those recommendations. And the toolkit is being presented at the Local Government Association Innovation Zone on the 2nd of July. So that's kind of an exciting opportunity to share what we've learned with other responsible authorities there as well. So I mentioned as well that we launched these strategic programs to kind of coalesce our partners around the really big priorities and to kickstart that delivery. They're quite varied, but generally kind of big region-wide thematic programs that need a mixture of sort of strategic or policy interventions and that kind of place-based integrated delivery. I would say the Western Forest is probably our most high-profile success to date. We've received £7.5 million from DEFRA to create the UK's first national forest in 30 years, and that actually spans the west of England, Gloucestershire and Wiltshire. So that's a really exciting project. And we also, particularly on all of our rivers work and under the Restoring Our Rivers banner, we work really closely with the Bristol Avon Catchment Partnership because they obviously, as I'm sure you're all aware, are really effective in convening partners around the kind of catchment-based approach. We're also, so State of Nature Monitoring, you can see there, that's one of our programmes, but it also cuts across everything. And we're really kind of working on our monitoring approach, which I'll talk about now on my final slide, which is around what the challenges have been and the next steps. And Alison said that this is probably what's of most interest to people here. So I'll just kind of talk you through some of the things that we've found. I'd say there were pros and cons to being the first. The pros being that it gave us a lot of profile and kind of a springboard to really involve new partners, speak to businesses, landowners, gave us a really great kind of bit of momentum to get us going. But the challenge on the flip side of that was that there was no confirmation around the role of responsible authorities in delivering, and as far as I'm concerned, also not for the role of local nature recovery, local nature partnerships, and no confirmation of funding attached to that. So that has now progressed, and there is confirmation, as Hannah said, that responsible authorities will have a delivery duty. And I believe there will also be a kind of stated role for where a place does have a local nature partnership for them to be involved in that delivery. But that's still not kind of been realised yet. So we're still in this slightly kind of no man's land phase, where we're just really trying to crack on with very limited resource. And on that note, I would also say that partners' capacity to actually develop the pipeline is a perpetual challenge. And I mean, that existed before we had an LNRS anyway, but it's just been kind of brought into sharper focus. You know, a lot of our partners are very stretched and dealing with kind of hand-to-mouth grant funding and delivery. So having the headspace to actually develop really big integrated delivery programs when there's not necessarily an obvious funding opportunity on the horizon is really tricky. So we're trying to work particularly with our partners like the Combined Authority and the water companies, who can possibly provide funding that is more for that development rather than needing shovel-ready projects. We're working with them to try and kind of plug that gap. And then we've got really great one really great example on the South Gloucestershire levels, where the Combined Authority provided 2 years worth of development funding which has been spread across 3 delivery partners working together, and that's going to come up with a really comprehensive package of measures which they can then seek other funding for. So we're trying to replicate that model elsewhere. And then finally, on challenges, I think the uncertainty around policy and potential funding streams is having a real impact. We have a really close relationship with the farming organisations and representatives in our region, so the NFU, the CLA, a lot of the farm cluster facilitators, and the narrative coming out of the farming sector at the moment and the kind of policy environment that they're seeing is quite bleak. And we'll see what comes out of the spending review today, but if reports are to be believed, then it looks as though funding available for things like environmental land management is going to be significantly diminished. So that presents a challenge, not only in, you know, the loss of a potential funding stream, but also in, you know, communicating with the farming and land management sector about the opportunities for nature recovery. And we don't want to overpromise and say there's, you know, all of these opportunities when we don't necessarily have the funding to back it up. And similarly with nature markets and private finance, the thing we hear consistently from investors is that policy uncertainty is what's preventing the market from maturing. So if there isn't a kind of clear, confident revenue stream like sale of BNG credits, then investors aren't going to risk huge amounts of capital. So the uncertainty around biodiversity net gain, I think, is also kind of slightly stymieing our ability to attract investment that way, even though we do have a lot of really exciting kind of innovative work going on in the region. And then, so that's the challenges, and they still exist, but as I said, there's things we're doing to try and mitigate them. And in terms of what we're doing next, I showed you those big strategic kind of region-wide programs. Those are really helpful for like demonstrating, you know, the big ticket ambition. But when it comes to actually attracting funding and investment, we've found that we need to zoom back in slightly to this more place-based, generally kind of sub-catchment scale or other kind of defined landscape scale approach, where we have existing sort of sub-local partnerships and mechanisms. So that's our approach going forward, but maintaining that kind of big regional strategic narrative. The Combined Authority is leading on our State of Nature monitoring programme, because that is one of the duties around delivery that I believe they will be given from DEFRA. I think we have made a lot of progress in the last year. We're just not that good yet at capturing it and celebrating it. So we really need to be able to do that and establish those kind of consistent monitoring and reporting processes. And we're hoping this autumn to publish a first State of Nature report. That may not be possible, but at least by next autumn, we intend to publish one and then make that increasingly kind of comprehensive every year until by 2030 we've got a really solid annual reporting mechanism for State of Nature, which links to the LNRS. And finally, just kind of strengthening our comms and promotion of the LNRS linked to that other duty that Hannah mentioned before, and really demonstrating how it fits with other policy and priorities for the region. So, for example, our new mayor is preparing a local growth plan at the moment, and will be preparing a spatial development strategy quite soon. And we really need to make sure that LNRSs are embedded in all of that policy and recognised as a key kind of piece of evidence and something that needs to be integrated into our approach to growth and development in the region. So that's another thing that we will be focusing on. I think that's everything. So I will stop sharing and hand over to Alison.
Right, back to me again. Thank you so much for that. That was they've all been really interesting so far. So back to me to bring it back to Chalk Streams, which is of course my favourite topic as programme manager. Hang on, I'm not sharing yet, am I? Oh no, I think I am sharing. Emily, am I there?
Yep, you're sharing.
Fabulous. Sorry.
No worries.
You'd think that I'd have got the hang of this by now, really, wouldn't you? So just to run through really quickly and finish off the presentation slots, a bit of a reflection on some of the local nature recovery strategies and what we're seeing in them for chalk streams. So I just want to run through a little bit about, you've already seen quite a few maps, so I'll go through that pretty quickly. Which of them have chalk streams, what's included in some of those, and how can we influence those still being developed, and looking ahead to how they might be used. I should say I'm probably the person, no, actually not probably, I am definitely the person who knows least about local nature recovery strategies in our presenting team. So do forgive me if I get something wrong. And I'm probably not the one that's going to be answering lots of questions, but it's really good to see questions coming in on the Q&A and on the chat. So we'll try and get to those in a minute. So another map, they all look slightly different. And this is to just show you where we're at with the chalk stream elements of the local nature recovery strategies. So I think one of the really interesting things to take from this map, which has been pointed out recently by Lorna at Hampshire Isle Wildlife Trust, is local nature recovery strategies, of course, are no respecters of catchment boundaries. So we have, particularly down in sort of the neck of the woods where I'm close to, sort of Hampshire, Wiltshire, Berkshire, you have the Kennet Crossing local nature recovery strategy boundaries and the Avon too. So you have potential for different things being put in different strategies for the same river, which for chalk streams could be a bit of an issue. And they're also, as you can see, at different stages of preparation. So we just have in chalk stream world, we just have the one completed, which is the Isle of Wight, which has some small, beautiful chalk streams. We've got quite a few that are still in preparation, the orange ones there in that sort of strip, and quite a few that are out for consultation and ones that have been consulted and are now being finalised. So just want to run through, not all of them, don't worry, just a few that I've happened to sort of dip into and check. I guess one of the things to say is they all look quite different, and I like that. They definitely have local flavour to them, which is really important. What I'm looking for is examples of things where chalk streams really stand out and measures that seem to really work, things across them that seem quite consistent, and maybe things that are different, and trying to think about where they seem to work well or potentially are going to work well, and maybe where we can perhaps promote some of the measures that are in some that others might still be able to adopt or look at. So kind of roughly going from north to south, starting up in the north. So this is outside Big Chalk territory, which doesn't extend up into Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, but for chalk streams, we have them up there. So I'm looking, and their public consultation carries on a little bit longer, and just trying to pick out some of maybe the different things in each of them to make a point. So they have chalk streams up in Hull and East Yorkshire. I think one of the really interesting things in this one is they're proposing to designate their chalk streams as local wildlife sites. So at the stage one that Hannah talked about earlier, you map local wildlife sites. Not all chalk streams are local wildlife sites. So they're talking about making all those local wildlife sites so they have some form of designation. Moving a bit further south, I'm going to trot through these fairly quickly. Norfolk and also I think Suffolk might be on the same timeline because the Nature Recovery Partnership covers both Norfolk and Suffolk. So as Bruce mentioned, their consultation closes today. So if you haven't yet, get your thoughts in. Interesting to see here that they have specifically mapped chalk streams on that map there. You can see them in green, and they have a measure in there for restoring and enhancing chalk stream habitats. Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes, their consultation is closed, but they've got some really interesting specific chalk stream measures in theirs that I've pulled out in here, particularly that they're keen to do more mapping and field surveys to identify their chalk streams and their conditions. So for me, that sounds like a great idea, and I'm assuming they're going to be working with their local partners who are already involved, for example, Chiltern's chalk streams and others in that area who already hold a lot of knowledge on their chalk streams. So they've also got restoration proposals. They're commenting on things like winterbournes, which for chalk streams are important, and reducing fine sediment input, which is a curse of chalk streams. Like many, they're talking about extending riparian zones, but they also talk, and there was a question I've seen pop up about water companies and water efficiency. So their LNRS does talk about reducing abstraction pressure and promoting water efficient developments. And managing the land to support recharge to the chalk aquifer. This is one of the ones where the chalk aquifer is actually also mentioned, as well as the chalk streams. This is a Kent one. I really like their graphic. It's quite busy, but I think that's a fair reflection of the space. It's a busy space, local nature recovery strategies. They've obviously very much got the Lawton principles in big on their graphic there. And of course, I like it because it talks about, or it's specifically got chalk streams on the graphic along with chalk grassland. And they have got a specific measure in there for chalk streams that again recognises winterbournes and chalk groundwater, and talks about protecting groundwater quality, which is also a very important factor. The Hampshire one, which is another one that's currently out for consultation. I see Nikki's on the chat, so she's here if people have got things they want to talk to Nikki about specifically for the Hampshire one. That one closes 23rd of June, so you've got a little bit longer to get your thoughts in on this one. And Bruce has already showed you some of the maps from the Hampshire one. This is one of the local nature recovery strategies that looks to have lumped chalk streams, recognise them, but the measures are lumped in with other headwaters and rivers too, and groundwater protection zones. So it's just a different approach. Some have particularly drawn out and have got chalk stream measures. Others have included them within other streams. And finally, and Hannah mentioned right at the start, Isle of Wight, it's the published one which has got chalk stream measures in it. It's mapped the chalk stream separately, which is great. It's based on the Natural England map that's out there, and it's advocating an integrated approach. So Zoe just talked about the importance of working with catchment partnerships, and I think this one really sort of plays to that idea of pulling people together to work to protect chalk streams. And it also very much mentions water company impact. So it says work with water industry and its regulators to ensure that drought measures, groundwater abstraction and catchment recharge operations protect and sustain fragile chalk river and stream systems. So again, they're picking up on links to water companies. So in summary, having gone through them and tried to see what's consistent in there, what's some of what's different. So it's quite right that they're different and they're variable. They are representing what local people are saying and what local responsible authorities are pulling together. That's great. It does present challenges for chalk streams where they span across local nature recovery strategies, and the risk that you end up with different measures in the different strategies, which it's fine, but it could become a problem if you're not treating them the same. So I think chalk streams are mentioned where they exist in all the local nature recovery strategies. They're mapped in different ways, and quite often the strategies are recognising the fact they need to improve the mapping. Come back to that in a minute. And winterbournes are mentioned in them, which is also great to see. They're often forgotten about, and they're an important part of the chalk stream network. I think virtually all of them pick up on the fact that the riparian corridor is an important space. I see Margot's commenting the wetlands in the riparian corridor are also important, absolutely. And it's really great to see that many of them have cottoned on to the idea of pressures from things like agriculture and highways runoff. And they're picking up on those in the measures. And some of them are also linking to more water company issues. I don't know as a non-LNRS expert where those measures go in terms of how they're taken forward, but I'd be really interested if anybody's got any examples or thoughts on that. And I'm really pleased as well to see that chalk groundwater is important and is being recognised within them. So in terms of the future of them, for chalk streams specifically, Hannah's already mentioned that potentially there's going to be greater use of the local nature recovery strategies, and that's what Zoe's commenting on too, to influence farmers and land managers and funding, and we've heard about some of the challenges of that. One of the things that I'm really interested in is, it won't have escaped your notice that a government position on growth and nature has been interesting, maybe best way to put it, of late. And certainly we've been doing our best to try and make sure that chalk streams are protected and recognised within the planning system. In a recent debate about whether chalk streams needed specific protection, Minister Pennycook did actually say that he felt that local nature recovery strategies were going to do the job of protecting chalk streams. And I think that there's a growing number of us in the chalk stream community who feel local nature recovery strategies are going to do some great things. Are they going to do the job of protecting chalk streams? I think that's probably asking a bit too much of what is expected of them. But it's interesting that government are picking up on the fact that local nature recovery strategies could have different uses. And I think it even more so makes it important for us to get measures in for chalk streams as much as we possibly can. And the other thing that's happening is the Office for Environmental Protection has conducted a review of local nature recovery strategies, and they in fact have got their own briefing webinar on the 24th of June, and I'm hoping we can put a link to that in the chat at some point for people who might want to sign up to learn more about the wider LNRS and how things are shaping up. So I guess based on what I've just said, I mean, we think in the chalk stream community that local nature recovery strategies are presenting a great opportunity. We don't think that they are the only thing that's needed for chalk streams. So what are the other things we're doing to try and improve protection for chalk streams? Well, we have the chalk stream restoration strategy, which is the program that I manage, and what was said to be the one big wish. And the one big wish is that chalk streams are properly recognised and protected. And as part of that, we're also updating our map of chalk streams. So in several of the LNRSs, there's mention of needing to improve the mapping. I'm really happy and keen to work with responsible authorities on building that evidence base of where chalk streams are and making sure that our maps are shared and consistent across all of the people that are working on chalk streams. So really happy to talk to people about that. We're also been campaigning for some time for chalk streams to be considered as irreplaceable habitat. There was supposed to be a consultation. The previous government had offered consultation on irreplaceable habitat. It hasn't happened. I'm not quite sure where we're at with the current government and whether there will be a consultation, but no matter what, we're still saying we think chalk streams should be considered to be irreplaceable habitat. And there was also something under the previous government proposed environmental outcome reports, which are a new system of sort of looking at, I'm going to describe this badly. They're kind of going to replace, I think, strategic environmental assessments and environmental impact assessments within the planning process. And we think that chalk streams should be specifically mentioned in that. And there has been much work from various MPs, Wildlife Trust, Rivers Trust, various member Rivers Trusts, on supporting an amendment for the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, where we think that chalk streams should get better recognition within spatial development strategies. So there's a lot going on here in the world of chalk streams to make sure that they're properly protected. And the LNRS are a big part of that, but not the only part. So we're doing additional work with lots of people to try and make sure that we're achieving that ambition, that one big wish of a better protection for chalk streams. So I think that's the end of my presentation slot. So I'd like to hand over to David. I think if all of us that have presented, if you want to come off video blank and show your faces. David, I know you've been having a look at the Q&As as they've been coming along. I'm hoping that you might be able to farm some of them out to the people you think are most going to be able to answer them. And we have got half an hour now to have discussion, debate, and I think I would also like to say we will be making, or I will be making some notes, and it would be great to maybe have a little bit of an outcome from this webinar about some of the things we've heard from you, which some of them we might be able to answer on this, some of them we might well want to take away and think about how we can better support the responsible authorities and everybody else in the future. So David, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Alison. And just to put you on notice, I'm going to come to you first in a moment with one of those questions from the Q&A, so bear with. Just to get you all sort of thinking in terms of how we use the next half hour, there are some quite specific, quite relevant questions in the chat, which we'll do our best to cover off in the next few minutes. But we're also really keen just to hear from you on the call. You have a significant sort of combined experience from your respective roles, organisations, and clearly there's a lot of work going on out there around these local nature recovery strategies. So if you do have examples, either of really good practice, maybe not so good practice, in relation to chalk streams and rivers that you'd like to share with us, please think about that. Particularly where you think the measures that generally we're seeing included within these strategies could be improved and go further to protect chalk streams. And also then good examples, we're going to touch on this now in the next few minutes, but good examples where we're seeing effective join up between the local strategies, those priorities and measures, and then the whole sort of ecosystem of other plans, policies, mechanisms, etc., which ultimately we know all need to sing to the same tune if we're going to see the progress that we want to see for not just chalk streams and rivers, but all of these really important calcareous habitats that we have at stake in. So I think, Alison, that's the sort of general ambition for this next 25 minutes or so now. In terms of the first question, and quite a specific one really, so you touched on it just a minute or two ago around both the sort of mapping position in relation to chalk streams, the fact that with the LNRSs, the stipulation is for those chalk streams and rivers that are designated to be recognised by local nature recovery strategies, and really just how big is therefore the gap in terms of those that aren't designated, those that indeed aren't properly mapped, and is there anything we can be doing in the next little while to try to improve that?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually quite a big part of what I do. You would think by now we would know where all the chalk streams are, and we do largely. I mean, the obvious big ones like the Test and the Itchen and the Avon, we know those. But consistently we're finding smaller chalk streams and springs that perhaps aren't mapped. So Natural England produced a map which is largely in use and I think has been used by a lot of the local nature recovery strategies. And I think at the time they recognised the fact that it needed to be developed and improved. I think it's fair to say that they're struggling to resource doing that, and I'm really keen that we start to develop a map for the CaBA Chalk Stream strategy, which is based upon input from local catchment partnerships and from groups who have improved information about where their chalk streams are. So in terms of designated, we have something like, it's hard to count. I think the numbers vary from anything from 200 to 280 chalk streams. It's hard to put a precise number on it, but only 11 of those are designated as SSSI. And then there are 4 special areas of conservation, which have got the highest levels of protection. So a proportion of the chalk network is designated, but a large proportion of it isn't. And I think one of the interesting things is in some areas, the chalk streams are designated as local wildlife sites, and some areas they aren't. So I know, talking yesterday to the Chilterns Chalk Stream team, I'm going to try and get this around the right way. I think in Hertfordshire, the chalk streams are all local wildlife sites. In Buckinghamshire, adjoining it, they're not necessarily. So there are huge inconsistencies in how chalk streams are recorded as local wildlife sites. I'm not sure we're going to better fix that, but I think we can definitely work together to build a better map which can be used by local nature recovery strategies and other groups too. So I'm really open to having discussions, David, with anybody who wants to help. I've certainly talked to the Sussex Nature Partnership, talking to somebody yesterday about some streams in Surrey, and talking to the Chilterns Chalk Streams group as well. So if there are groups who want to chat, I'm really keen to build that map and make it better and make it useful for people.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Alison. I'm going to come to, well, it's going to be a combination possibly of Hannah and Bethany for the next one. So there's been a couple of questions on this point around integration with, again, that sort of existing ecosystem of plans and policies. but then specifically the river basin management plans, catchment action plans, and indeed catchment partnerships. So I just wondered, could you offer a sort of Environment Agency perspective on that? And we've had one example you may have seen in the Q&A feed around how that's been achieved in Dorset, but hopefully there's also a broader perspective to bring on that. So Hannah, Bethany, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, if I just quickly kick off, and then I'll bring Bethany, who's joined us for the Q&A sheet from the Environment Agency as well. So the statutory guidance is kind of clear that the LNRSs need to kind of draw on existing plans and strategies, and river basin management plans are explicitly referred to in the statutory guidance. So that is something that is a requirement. The other piece of advice, so it's non-statutory kind of guidance to the responsible authorities, was about key stakeholders that they needed to kind of draw into the process of LNRS, and catchment partnerships were one of those as well. So right from the beginning, the expectation is that those kind of plans and strategies were being kind of joined up. As I mentioned, around the country, for each of the 48 LNRSs, we have Environment Agency staff kind of on the ground feeding into that. And a big part of their work has been making those links between existing plans and strategies, and kind of taking that evidence and knowledge into the LNRS process. Bethany, do you want to add? Because I know you've got some examples, kind of might be worth just drawing out.
Which ones were you thinking of, Hannah?
In terms of kind of some of the stuff down in Devon and so I mean just kind of so in terms of our staff, they've been looking at the mapping, and they've been looking at kind of what's in the catchment planning system for the river basin management plans for their stretches, and kind of translating that information over into the LNRS process. So we are tracking LNRSs kind of as they come through, and looking at kind of that interaction. In some places you will see kind of word for word you know, river basin management plan measures that are being kind of translated into LNRS. I'd probably say it's a mixed picture across the country, as to some have been very successful, and some, you know, I think it's reflected everywhere, but kind of some to lesser or greater extent.
Yeah, I guess the other thing to add is in terms of our area staff that are involved, they're very often our catchment coordinators, who are quite often working with those catchment partnerships and other people involved in local delivery on the watercourses. So hopefully people that kind of other partners might be familiar with and working with, that they can draw in those wider things that are happening.
Okay, brilliant. Hannah, Bethany, thank you. Hannah, can I just ask a really quick one? There was a question. So you mentioned natural capital pilots briefly in your presentation, and someone just said, could you just elaborate slightly and just say where those are for people?
Yeah, so that's a pilot. So it's full title is Local Investment in Natural Capital. So there are 4 locations around the country. So Cornwall is one of them. Birmingham is one of them. Oh, you're testing me now. Yorkshire, North and York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, and then up in the northeast as well. I can put that. I'll find that. I might put a link in one of the chats for people that are interested in finding out. Cornwall's quite an interesting one to look at if interested, because the LNRS has been published, and there's clear links between. They've got a marketplace, a kind of online platform for green finance, and they're linking their LNRS delivery kind of with that as well.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Bruce, I'm going to come to you now, if that's okay. So I know this is something you've been grappling with in our work across the Big Chalk Partnership, and it's around the questions around how it's been possible to navigate the different data standards and outputs, or inputs even, for each of the LNRS sort of areas, on the basis that presumably it has rather differed depending on which authority area you are in. So how is it possible to build that sort of coherent picture and ultimately approach when you have got these different sort of applications of data, different data sets presumably being applied at different authority geographies?
Well, yes, this is interesting. So you need to bear in mind that there are 2 parts to the local nature recovery strategy. One is the statement of measures and priorities, and that's the one that I've been pulling out the priorities and measures for each of the LNRSs that are coming through in the big chalk, and the other one is the mapping. The statements are relatively easy. Each LNRS looks different, and go around their website and their consultation, and most of them are actually fairly intuitive, but they're actually different to each other how you do it. But once you find what you're looking for, then I found it relatively easy to pull out the priorities and measures and copy them across. They're usually in a table somewhere, and that's quite straightforward. I'm at the moment just concentrating on pulling across, and then once we've got all 27, maybe early next year, then we can start thinking about some real analyses there. The other thing that goes with that, and it's going to be really interesting, is each LNRS will have priority species, and we will want to go through those again once they're all through. I haven't started doing this yet, and get a core set of common set of priority species across the whole of the big chalk area. There'll also be others which are sort of calcareous specific, but sort of more locally important. So that'll give us a really interesting and useful thing, but it will take time to do that. It won't be straightforward. The mapping is going to be the really interesting one. The mapping of the opportunity areas and the measures. DEFRA are looking into potentially putting a national map together. And if they can do that, they will cut it to the areas we want. So they'll cut it to protected landscapes. They'll cut it to the big chalk area. If they've said they'll do that. So hopefully they will have the task of trying to get that slightly unified into a one-stop shop where you can get it, because otherwise I'll have to try and write to 27 different local nature recovery strategies and ask for the shapefiles for each of those, which is possible, but it'll be time consuming, and then putting them all together will be a bit more time consuming. But if that's done centrally, which they're looking into at the moment, that will make a really big difference.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, and I mean, almost regardless of which lens we place on this, whether you're looking at it from a chalk streams condition perspective, whether you're looking at it from a chalk and limestone grasslands sort of condition perspective, whether you're looking at it from the point of view of priority species and their distributions and needs going forward, we need to be able to build that overarching sort of understanding of how, from the sort of authority geography upwards, ultimately those overarching nature recovery priorities can be best served. So that's an area that we, within the Big Chalk Partnership, will, as Bruce says, be spending quite a bit more time on over the coming months.
I did just add one more thing I just thought of, which, so the advantage of chalk streams compared to other habitats, they do cross different boundaries, but they hopefully you won't have one LNRS prioritising opportunities and measures for a chalk stream and then cross the border. It'll change. That's more likely with some of the other habitat types, but hopefully with the chalk streams there'll be a sense of continuity across LNRSs, which will join the LNRSs up.
And actually, Bruce, just while we're on this, we did have a question about biodiversity not respecting these administrative sort of boundaries. Very much the sort of rationale at the heart of the Big Chalk Partnership's approach to all of this. Do we have any examples yet of strategies being seen to be looking, outside of their immediate administrative sort of boundaries to do what you're talking about?
So I haven't delved into that, but I do know that most LNRSs have been having bilateral conversations with their neighbouring LNRSs. Obvious ones ones that obviously link up when you're looking at maps is Oxfordshire and Berkshire, but that's not surprising. The Local Records Centre, TVEC, did the mapping for both of those using a systematic conservation planning approach, so it's not surprising there. What will be interesting is then to see how, I actually haven't looked at it properly, but I could do how Hampshire and Berkshire match up, for instance.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. And Zoe, I might bring you in on this point, actually, having sort of seen how the West of England strategy has come to fruition? How was this approached in its development?
Yeah, I mean, Stuart would be able to talk in more detail about the actual process of engaging with the neighbouring authorities, but I believe there's actually a requirement to, yeah, Hannah's nodding, to consult with your neighbouring authorities. So ours are Gloucestershire, Wiltshire and Somerset. So we consulted with them in preparation of ours, and then they are consulting as they prepare theirs, but obviously ours is now published, so that's kind of set. So I guess that's another pro of having gone first. We could kind of set the tone a bit. But just on the like joined up delivery, obviously I mentioned the Western Forest, that spans 3 local nature recovery strategy areas, and the woodland creation that happens in that will be guided by those 3 LNRSs over the next 5 years. We also have an ambition, and this is much more conceptual at this stage, but it is informed by Big Chalk, so relevant here, to work at a similar scale for a calcareous grassland restoration programme. So we have the kind of south end of the Cotswolds and the east and north of the Mendips in our patch, and then adjoining those 2 national landscapes is some excellent calcareous soils. But if you move east and southeast, you reach the North Wessex Downs and Cranbourne Chase, and if you look at the Big Chalk map, there's some fairly narrow kind of corridors of calcareous soils between those 4 national landscapes, and we would love to work at a similar scale there, to do some kind of large-scale grassland restoration, obviously again informed by the LNRSs in those corresponding areas.
Yeah, brilliant, Zoe, thank you. And I'll just stay on because I've got another question as well that's come up in the chat. But yeah, in that sense, as Bruce was sort of alluding to, with a more of a catchment based approach, taking you naturally across those administrative boundaries, so it works with other habitat types too. So I think, yeah, absolutely, when it comes to thinking about how we achieve favourable sort of conservation status for lowland chalk and limestone grassland. So the other question was quite a specific one. When you were talking earlier, you made a point about how the West of England strategy sort of accounts for SSSI's national nature reserves, and the point in the chat or in the Q&As that was made was, well, of course, many of those SSSIs, those national nature reserves, don't necessarily have the resources, or the organisations managing them don't necessarily have the resources needed to ensure they are in favourable condition, or indeed can be sustained and perhaps extended over time. So it was just to clarify how the West of England strategy is dealing with that reality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the duty on SSSIs kind of primarily falls on Natural England, who are one of our key partners. We work really closely with the Wessex team in the region. We've also, when we set our kind of 2021 to 30 strategy and targets, we made a protected sites target one of our kind of partnership targets as well, which links through. I can't remember exactly what the kind of, if there's a statutory target around SSSI condition, but it links to that anyway. And we are essentially working with Natural England to support them however we can to bring those sites into good management. And that also fits with so another one of our strategic programs is 30 by 30 and local wildlife sites. Obviously, local wildlife sites aren't a statutory designation, but we believe that if we can improve our understanding and have a kind of reliable monitoring and management of all of our local wildlife sites, we will be confident that we can count them towards our 30 by 30 target. And obviously SSSIs are kind of a statutory designation, so even more important than local wildlife sites, and using that 30 by 30 as kind of an incentive and an impetus to move us towards better management across all of those sites.
Right. Thank you, Zoe. Hannah, I'm going to come back to you, if I may, around a couple of questions that were posed earlier on around the nature of the relationship between local nature recovery strategies and the planning process, and local plans specifically within that. I know this isn't necessarily your direct area of work, but would you be able to just elaborate a little more around that? And there was a specific point about whether, for example, LNRSs stand as material consideration within planning process and decisions.
Yeah, thanks, David. And yeah, so in terms of how LNRSs will be considered in the planning system, I think we've got kind of a slightly moving feast, given there's quite a lot going on around planning reform at the moment. But it is very much kind of set out that the two things will work together, and that the LNRSs will provide that evidence base for planners in making their decisions. So I mentioned that kind of change from a have regard requirement to a take account, kind of that, so that's strengthening kind of going forward. In plan making, the expectation is, so for local plans, the expectation is very much that they will be that evidence base, but more importantly, it's how they use that the LNRS to create policies and potentially safeguard areas. The NPPF has had kind of requirements in there for mapping and potentially safeguarding for nature recovery. That exists, well, previous to kind of very recent updates, that existed before, but perhaps what planners didn't have was the evidence and the information to kind of inform them doing that. So that's what we're hoping to see going forward, is that planners will use LNRSs. That does not mean that every mapped area in an LNRS will become a safeguarded kind of protected site under the planning system. What it means is that planners will consider what other things are happening in their area, what pressures are on certain sites, and if there is a location that has been mapped as an area that could become of importance for biodiversity that actually is under pressure, then maybe that's the one that is appropriate to be safeguarded kind of through the local plan site. In terms of being a material consideration, I think in time, yes, it probably will be, but I think that will be as we see kind of local plans kind of developing where an LNRS exists in place. So there will be a bit of a kind of building picture around that. As I said, we're seeing a kind of emerging picture with planning reform. The planning practice guidance was updated earlier this year, I think it was, with references to NPPF, so those that are interested kind of have a look at those aspects within the planning practice guidance. And NPPF updates are expected later this year, I think, is the most recent timetable, and we will see kind of more in there as well. So it's a little bit of a watch this space, but it's always been the appetite that the two things talk together and help kind of drive that decision making.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. Just Zoe, really briefly, yeah, it may be too early to say, but are you seeing evidence of that relationship now developing as a result of the West of England plan strategy being published?
So the Bath and North East Somerset local plan is kind of it was about to be published, and they've since had to go back to the drawing board with new housing targets. And I believe because they've kind of had to go back and redo the plan and the consultation, they are taking account of more of the local nature recovery strategy. I say take account there, not in the legal sense, because I'm not entirely sure what the difference between having regard and taking account is, but they are using it. All of the other three local plans in our region are at different stages, and I don't think in a position at the moment to integrate more consideration of the strategy. But I did mention the local growth plan, which our hope is that there will be direct reference to nature recovery and the local nature recovery strategy in that plan as well.
Yeah, that sounds like something that others will be really keen to hear about as it takes shape. Thank you, Zoe. And that sort of leads us on to what may be the last couple of questions, actually. So, Alison, I'm going to come to you at this point, and I think these questions are linked. So there was a something about how all of the sort of understanding and sort of knowledge that's in this virtual room today, how can that be ultimately taken forward to help support what we know is a pretty fundamental resourcing gap in terms of realising the opportunities presented by LNRSs. We might go beyond that and say the requirements when it comes to things like chalk stream sort of condition, grassland condition. And sort of linked to that, a very specific question about whether the chalk stream group, for example, could do more to help unlock the creation of case studies, much as we've been talking about today, really, that can sort of be that or help with that catalytic sort of knowledge exchange across networks and ultimately fast track, the sort of realisation of some of those opportunities pointed to by the LNRSs. So, sorry, does that make sense?
No, it's a really good one to maybe start bringing things to a close on, because what are we going to do with everything that we've heard and all the discussions we've had is a really good question. We don't bring together people lightly just to kill time on a Wednesday morning. So what are we going to do with it? I've been scribbling down and making notes, and I'm really pleased as well that we've got Ellie and I think Andy as well from Office for Environmental Protection. I tend to find that when they write a briefing note, the government do seem to sit up and take notice, and I haven't had sight of what's in their briefing note, but I'm kind of hoping that the fact that they're interested in our call today, hopefully some of what we've said resonates with what they're learning, and that would be potentially a useful vehicle to be able to take forward some of these challenges and put them to the government about what's going to happen next. So I think it's going to be hard for us to do that alone. So I think we need to buddy up, which is why working with Big Chalk is a really useful and powerful thing. So I think what I need to do as a result of this call is make a note of the things that we're still struggling with or not, or finding it hard to see what the direction of travel is. I think Hannah and Bethany, it's great having them on the call. So they're our kind of direct line as well into working with DEFRA and Natural England colleagues. And Bruce has done a huge amount to pull things together in the Big Chalk domain to understand again where these things are working and where they're not. So I think it's a case of pulling together the output from what we've learned today after this meeting, and then finding the right routes to land it in the right places to try and have the biggest impact that we can. And I think that depends upon us using our links with OEP, with the Environment Agency and DEFRA too. So and I think that point about resourcing, and I think the point that Zoe started off and has been continued as well about this policy uncertainty really sort of undermining the ability to make progress, that seems to be a really big issue. And I guess just to finish off, I do have what we call our national support group, which has representatives from DEFRA, Ofwat, Water UK and various groups, and we kind of use that as our problem solving panel. So if we have problems that we can't solve ourselves, we take it to them. So this is certainly something we will take up to them, and is another route. DEFRA is a very big organization, so you sometimes need to land things in different places in DEFRA, so we will use that as another route to take our points up. But I don't know, Bethany, Hannah, whether you've got any suggestions about how we might effectively take what we've learned from today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I'd add is kind of getting behind the LNRSs that are coming through. We want these to be successful. We want these to kind of drive that change. There is a lot of things out there, and I do appreciate that. I think having worked kind of around environmental plans and planning for a while, I think the sort of governance and the kind of structure around LNRS is a bit different. It is new. The kind of links to such a wide variety of levers and potential opportunities for delivery is something that's kind of really exciting. There are some uncertainties. There are some things that we're going to kind of learn. This is the first iteration as well. Remember that they're here to stay. We want to learn things. We want to kind of build on what we're hearing. So it's great to have lots of you on the call today. And I think take the opportunities to drill into the LNRSs near you. And as we get more coming through to publication, then let's start using them.
Well said, Hannah. Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you. We are pretty much at time, so Emily, I'm going to hand back to you now. There's been one or two questions about the content being made available, both obviously the recording, but also whether we can make the presentation content available. So I guess we'll just need to clarify that presenters were happy to do so off the back of this call. But can you just maybe let people know where they'll be able to find that as and when that's possible? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, just as long as everyone who's presented is happy to share the kind of resources, they can be posted alongside the recording on the CaBA website. So I will put a link. If Becca, actually, could you put a link to the CaBA website into the chat? That would be handy. But yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Thank you for attending as well. It was brilliant webinar. And it was so great to see so many kind of engaging questions coming in and everyone in the chat getting engaged. Just quickly, I have put in the chat for the OEP webinar that Alison mentioned, and also a link to sign up to the CaBA Chalk Stream mail list if you'd like to receive updates on more of these webinars. But yeah, that's it from me. Thanks again, everybody, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.